All right, welcome into Prime Suspects alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr. I'm your host, Matt Landis. Today's topics, high-stakes NFL survivor pools, and a doubleheader on Kalshi, including insights on trading activity and the future of sports betting as an asset class. Kicking it off with NFL Survivor, guys, it was reported earlier this month that the Westgate Superbook will debut a survivor pool with a $5,000 buy-in. And not to be outdone, Circa last week announced Circa Grandissimo, a survivor pool with an entry fee of $100,000. Adam, we'll come to you first here. What do you make of these costlier entries? And would Prime and or BetChris ever consider something similar?
Well, I'll leave that second part to Joe because I know he's been a campaigner for something in that realm. I think it's just going to be, what's the over-under on how many entrants? There's been a couple of discussions back and forth. Will they get 25 or 30? I think I saw over under 40 at one point, which I don't know. I imagine there'll be a bunch of people getting together to form some teams or whatnot. But, I know that it was a long package of items that you got. Vision, subscription, whatnot. I guess a few nice dinners and that. But, yeah, I guess I'll see how many are entering this before I put up my hand for this kind of stake. But, it's Derek at his best. He's trying to bring some of the biggest and wealthiest into the game. I imagine you'll get some people that really just do enter this. Maybe they haven't entered the other ones previously, but they have enough money. They want to beat their chest and sort of say, they won whatever it is, a couple of $1 million against the best of the best. But yeah, it was an interesting one, but I don't know how well it'll really take off.
And Joe, from the perspective of a fan and a bettor, what's your point of view on these new contests?
Great marketing by Derek and Circa. Don't like the name Grandissimo. Kind of felt like, if I was sitting in that marketing meeting, I might have pushed back on that one. If you look at the way betting is right now, people seem to like jackpots, just parlays, things like that. These contests are an extension of that. So outstanding. And here's the thing. He could have come up with a contest where they made $1 million entry and he would have had, a certain number of people lining up because it's the same thing as people who go out and they buy a $200,000 Italian supercar. Why do they do it? Well, it's in part to be able to show, I can afford a $200,000 Italian supercar, right? Being able to say I'm entered into the Grandissimo is a, $100,000 calling card for somebody to say I'm a big deal in sports betting. So I think they'll do well. It also shows that what you can do when you have a building of penny slot machines behind you to be able to backstop everything you do. Let's remember Circa is a casino first, a sports betting brand second, but they leverage it very well and creating ever more excitement behind their contests. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
But if there is anyone out there that wants to go 50-50, I'm up for it.
Well, that's the thing. Right now, you're going to have more teams forming than in the space race here to try to be able to cobble together the money and be able to enter it. When you think of some of these teams who may come together and the awesome firepower that they're going to have for a survivor pool, it really is probably going to be the greatest concentration of betting capital and minds for so few picks of any contest on the planet. But it'll be interesting to see the results.
And as I think about your guys' comments here and previous conversations we've had on this show about Prime catering to a very sharp pool of bettors out of the gate, looking to expand that base, capture more recreational bettors over time, how do you guys view contests like this as a potential avenue to fuel that kind of user acquisition?
And I think they're great if you can handle the overlay right now. Again, Derek has a casino in order to be able to backstop all these contests and offer these big guaranteed payouts. So he's leveraging that very well. Prime does not have an online casino. Can they do things on a smaller scale? Yeah, but then you're doing things on a smaller scale, right? So
Las Vegas Sportsbook is just a sportsbook. They aren't the casino. So yes,
right.
Those are the kind of levels that we could match. But again, I know Joe's had it in his mind to campaign Wall Street and all those ones of having some kind of challenge cup or something of that nature on the East Coast. Because remember, a lot of this on the West Coast, nothing on the East Coast. So I think there's space for it to do something at some point.
Well, from new waves in survivor pools to the raging waters of prediction markets, it was announced last week that Elon Musk's AI company, XAI, will power insights on Kalshi to help inform user trading activity on the platform, a deal Kalshi later denied. But if we go ahead and play out the thought exercise anyway, and imagine a world in which Twitter-powered insights do get added to Kalshi, Adam, how much real alpha, if any, would it provide to traders on the platform? And how much of it would you consider more along the lines of gimmicky content designed to draw in retail traders, perhaps a bit similar to the trends type of content we see across the sports betting landscape?
Well, I mean, most of their markets are that way already, aren't they? I mean, if you go on to Poly Markets and Kalshi and that, there's all kinds of weird shit going on. I think even there was one last week I saw posted. I didn't see it direct on Poly Market, but they were doing an over-under when those guys from Louisiana were going to get captured. And I believe there's 8 out of 10 right now that escaped from the jail down there. So they just put up anything. So why not? I mean, it seems like they're getting traction. People are trading into it. You know, it's just kind of the gimmicky aspect of it. But don't sleep on the prediction markets. They're obviously doing a lot of stuff right now. They're trending. They're getting people, you know, going through, I believe, through Robinhood, Webull, things that always have captive audiences. I don't know what episode was it, but there was at some point where I think Joe and I were kind of on the opposite sides of the fence of would Robinhood be a place for the future of the sports betting of whatnot. It is what it is. And right now you've got to realize that there's nothing in their way. I mean, Elon has the relationships he has. Kalshi and whatnot have their relationships. Obviously, the juniors on that way, and there was a former board chairman or whatever going to the other way. This isn't going anywhere. So let's just buckle up and sort of see what it ends up creating in the end.
And Joe, building on those most recent remarks from Adam, Kalshi has existing ties to the administration via Don Jr.'s role on its advisory board. And with Elon's potential involvement at the product level, how much concern would you have about a popular prediction market becoming more of a political tool?
Not much, really. I mean, again, I don't see this as being great political leverage in any way. It would be a curiosity, I would think. It would be a media curiosity to see things that were going on there. But again, look, right now they are in the kind of flood the zone, create excitement, create awareness around the brand, and doing these kind of things. They're doing exactly what they should be doing to try and grow their consumer business, right?
Well, sticking with that in a sense with Kalshi, but pivoting to a different topic, founder and CEO Tarek Mansour last Friday suggested when he spoke on a panel at the Solana Accelerate conference in New York that gamblers may be able to use most 401k account providers to buy event contracts, possibly including sports, via Kalshi before the end of next year. And Joe, we'll stick with you here. Much has been said about sports betting as an asset class, but this would take it to a new level. What's your view of the place sports-based event contracts could potentially have in Americans' retirement portfolios?
Well, as I was just saying, Tarek's doing what a typical American CEO does. CEOs in America should really be like CNOs, Chief Narrative Officers. And so he's out there and he's pushing the narrative on what the potential is for Kalshi, what it is for performance contracts, those kind of things. And he's creating buzz for investors. He's creating awareness. Wow, he did it at a Solana conference. I mean, does he get like a double word score for being able to pull in crypto and performance contracts at the same time? However, starting to say things like 401ks, now he's treading over it. Now he's definitely treading into securities. Okay. That is a really heavily regulated marketplace. That's not one that is easily penetrated. It's also one where people who run those 401ks, who do the investments for those things, typically when it comes to investments, they want investments of a certain length of horizon that are predictable, that, there's an actual asset or something like that underneath it that they can evaluate for value. Yes, a lot of people have been talking for a while about sports betting as an asset class. It just seems right now that it's still a bit of a stretch to think that that's going to happen when you think that there's one very large financial company that is deeply involved with this, that being Susquehanna, and they seem to be involved in every aspect of it right now. But you don't see other companies yet diving in there. I don't know that maybe Susquehanna is revolutionary and they're way out in front of everybody and they're thinking on this. And, robber barons at Goldman Sachs and places like that are somehow lagging on this. Again, I think it's very frothy to be talking about it like that. But then again, Jesus, I mean, look at how far we've come in such a short amount of time. I guess right now it'd be idiotic to bet against it, but I don't consider it likely, at least not in the near future.
And Adam, while Joe has his doubts, if this actually does happen, it'll require significant liquidity to generate the required scale of returns. How do you see this playing out in terms of opportunity creation for professional bettors and syndicates on one hand versus an increase in market efficiency, potentially eroding edges on the other hand?
I can guarantee one thing. If 401k investors, providers, whatever, start coming into this market, I'll sure as hell make sure I'm on the other side of that, because that'd have to be some of the softest gamblers we've ever seen enter the market. I don't believe they'd have any issues at all getting liquidity, but I would sure as hell not want my 401k provider or whoever's handling my money and gambling on retirement funds to be playing in this market. This is a pool of sharks, and I can guarantee any 401k investor or whatnot doesn't want to be playing in these waters. I think one of the other things that was mentioned in the article as well was the foresight that they believe they'll have some kind of parlay action by NFL season. We've always said prediction markets, straight bets only, that's sort of the path forward, and that all the carnival games and parlays and whatnot would live with the bookmakers. But there's probably a significant way where they can put canned kind of same game parlays up on these things and have it where, again, you'll have plenty of professional syndicates, whomever wants to, be sitting on that other side offering certain team to win a game and someone to score a touchdown or something of that nature, and just set that same game correlated parlay on one side and have yes, no on that. Now, suddenly you have the opportunity to have thousands and thousands of different canned parlays or whatever you want to put together just with a yes and no on it. So now you have a lot more content growth, and I'm sure you'll get those market makers wanting to sit behind those kind of products as well, because now if they've got the general public, which more often than not are going to be fish in this market, the sharks will sit there, they'll put up something that looks somewhat enticing, they'll have their edge, and then they'll be able to get more liquidity and more volume. So I think they need to concentrate more on that, getting a bit more expansive on their product, adding these, potential parlays or any kind of correlated outcomes, rather than worrying about the 401k providers. However, bring those into the market, and I sure as hell want to be on the other side of anyone trying to play that stuff.
The thing to keep in mind here is this. There's nobody to say no to them right now, right? The fact that we're talking about them doing parlays. Wow, what an incredible. I mean, I can only imagine that Nevada, New Jersey, and everybody else at the state level are going to lose their goddamn minds. There's some people who think like because Kalshi was able to squash a preliminary injunction against them in federal court that this is all over and that it's a done deal, and New Jersey, Nevada, and the others don't have any recourse in the courts. I can tell you from personal experience, New Jersey are not quitters when it comes to going into federal court and pursuing their interests. I don't imagine that Nevada will be either. But right now, it's amazing. Like, who is going to say no to them? It really seems like their only limit right now is rolling this out at a pace that the market is willing to accept, and not just say we've federalized sports betting. Just how slow is slow enough to copy essentially what the state licensed sports books are doing at a pace that it becomes inevitable. They can't do it overnight, but the fact that they're talking about doing parlays by NFL season, that's ridiculously fast. But no one at CFTC is saying no to them. Nobody in the administration is going to say no to them. Could be all over but the shouting by the end of the football season.
Yeah, I mean, the deck's obviously stacked. They seem to be doing what they need to, and take away Nevada and New Jersey, and you still have a pretty big player base. So I don't think this is stopping. Been saying it for the last few months. It just seems like it's on a roller coaster ride, and it's just going to keep pushing and pushing. So get on, take the ride.
We seem to be so enthusiastic about it. But since we're spending so much time talking about these guys of late, can somebody get a fucking check from them to continue like this? I feel like we are sponsored by Kalshi. We talk about him so much, but that's the nature of the business right now.
And as I listen to you guys, Joe, to your point, especially about there not being anybody to say no to them right now, it seems like our runaway train at this point in terms of the momentum that Kalshi is gaining. If that continues, what do you make of options available to not only Prime and BetCris, but all the other operators across the more conventionally regulated U.S. sports betting marketplace?
Well, it's super bloody hard, and that's going to make it even harder. And then you've got some of these states. I know there's a current bill in Ohio where they're talking about 2% on volume. Well, when this all started, I was eager to go into Tennessee. Again, there was no market access fees. It was $750,000, and it was a fair tax. The day they went to 1.85% on volume, it was hell no. I mean, it's not my decision, but if Ohio were to go 2% volume tax on sports betting, I'd be telling Prime Sports to shut down their doors. Let's go find somewhere else, because it's insane, and it's unfortunate that they don't truly understand the difference between the sports betting and the iGaming, which they've got an iGaming bill that is just extraordinarily, license fees just beyond even Illinois. It's just unfortunate. So with all the sweepstakes, with all the prediction markets, I sure as hell wouldn't want to be a sports betting operator in the US.
Think about it. What Adam just brought up, and I can't even believe I forgot it. I forgot about it since this morning. Any other week, any other month since we started this podcast, our dozens of listeners would have expected us to come out firing napalm and smart bombs at that ridiculous privilege tax that was proposed by State Senator Blessing in Ohio last week. So on top of a 20% GGR, a 2% handle tax. And Senator Blessing is apparently an engineer by trade, but I don't think he knows math. But Kalshi is sucking up all the oxygen, and lawmakers and regulators ought to take a lesson from that, okay? This is the wrong time. You're not reading the room right now if you are trying to squeeze the guys who are playing by the rules and providing you revenue, and you just, you know what? We need to get more out of those guys. We need to totally hose those guys, because I can say this now because I'm no longer at Prime, right? So it's not like I'm going to get Prime in trouble. But if things continue to go, if New Jersey actually was successful in increasing their tax rate to 25-30%, like was being proposed earlier in the spring, and this was able to get traction in Ohio, honestly, I'd pull a profit exchange, except I'd pull out, instead of going sweepstakes, I'd go camp out down the street at the CFTC's offices until they gave me a DCM certification so I could start taking performance contracts, because it's all anybody's talking about right now. I realize we're the industry, right? And those Fan Kings ads haven't gone anywhere. But this is unbelievable that states, they've let this get out of the box between sweeps and now performance contracts and everything. And when you hear stuff like what came out of Ohio last week, these guys aren't listening. They're just not listening.
Joe, do you think there's a reason that's not as openly discussed as to why they might not be listening? Or is there anything, to Adam's point, about a seemingly simple concept that sports betting is different from iCasino that just hasn't been connected yet, that could drive meaningful progress for, again, the regulated operators who are playing by the rules?
So there's a certain element of it where it's being punitive. There's a certain percentage of Americans that don't like gambling, that think it's a dirty business, okay? And they want to see it operate in the most punitive tax environment possible. They're going to punish us for doing it, okay? So there's those. But I think more so it's an element of lazy budgeting. Since Governor Murphy wasn't along for the ride initially in New Jersey, and he's on his way out because he's term limited, I'll take a kick at him. He comes in, and in his final budget, he said he wants to fill a budgetary gap, largely like half of the budgetary gap of what he's proposed, by increasing the taxes on sports books. That's just pure laziness, right? Like, we're going to pick one business and we're going to drop a tax bomb on them. Meanwhile, New Jersey doesn't tax alcohol, weed, any of those things, cigarettes, at anywhere near the rate that they tax sports betting. And then to propose to go up even higher, again, it's just pure laziness. All right. It was the same thing in Illinois. I better be careful. I'm going to Chicago this week and I don't want to get my ass kicked by Governor Pritzker's people. Okay. But it was the same thing in Illinois when they, rapidly escalated what the tax rate was there. It's the same thing in Ohio. It's just lawmakers, governors being lazy about where they're going to get money. And look, I'll grant it. There's less money coming from the federal government now. Okay. Things have tightened up here. There's less money going out to the states while the mandates that they have on healthcare, education, things like that have only gotten greater, more expensive. But to say like, hey, we got a great idea. We're going to do it all on the backs of this one volume, low margin business that we just started in the last few years. Who, at the end of this, who stays in that business? Okay. Even FanDuel and DraftKings, you can argue like, well, now they've got an escape clause. I'm sure that those guys, between the two of them, scratch together enough money and influence enough people to get a DCM certification from CFTC, and they're in prediction marketplaces. This is just a collision of lazy statecraft and budgeting with not reading the room, not paying attention to what's going on around them. And we haven't even talked about sweeps, have we? Right? So at least you can say that prediction marketplaces has a patina of legality around it, right? Whereas sweeps is just, it's our own internal gray market that we have here. And we haven't talked about DFS Plus, and there's another internal gray market. So states, lawmakers, governors, they got to be a bit more thoughtful when they think about if they're going to continue to treat gaming, and I'm just talking gaming in general, gaming is a key driver of state tax revenue. They're going to have to start thinking a bit more proactively about what the business is going to be going forward. It's not just big, hotel, casino, castles with tables and things like that. It is a digital business, or a large part of it is a digital business. And so how do they exist in that environment? And it is now a competitive environment. They're competing against the gray markets. They're competing against would-be regulated markets. How are they going to exist? Why would Prime continue to operate as a licensed state operator? What's in it for us? Or what's in it for them? I'm not there. What's in it for them? What's in it for Fan Kings? What's in it for those guys? Right? So states are going to have to be a bit more entrepreneurial on the lawmaking regulatory side to say, hey, stick with us. This is why it's a good thing. This is why it's good for your business. And so they can combat all this stuff that's going on around because it's happening so fast. Oh my God, it's head spinning, isn't it?
Well, for bettors, bookmakers, and beyond, from all angles, it seems like quite the fascinating time to be in this space. To the audience, we want to thank you for taking the ride with us. We appreciate you tuning in as always, and we'll catch you again next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.